I'm a capitalist. I love what I do, but I'd like to make money when I'm doing it. Wait a second, we bring them in and then they don't stay because the culture sucks. Now they say there's not a labor crisis, there's a leadership crisis. Well, I've been saying that for 20 years. It's not people are the best profit strategy, it's well-led people are the best profit strategy. This was said to me by the CEO of one of the biggest road builders in the world. And he said, just tell them to be patient. All they have to do is show up for the next 10 years and they'll be a vice president.
What would you say is the most common mistake that you see contractors make? My name is Tristan Wilson. Welcome to the Edge podcast. I'm really excited today to have Wally Adamchik on the podcast. Wally has done the rare trifecta. He was a Marine officer. He's got an MBA from UNC, and he was the Notre Dame Leprechaun, and he has spent 20 plus years teaching construction companies how to lead without yelling, which if you've ever been on a job site, is harder than it sounds. And just somebody that I'm really excited to spend some more time with. Wally and I had the pleasure of, we'd met at, an industry event, and have followed each other's work, and just really excited to sit down with you. So Wally, welcome to the Edge podcast.
It's great to be with you, Tristan. I look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, I guess first things first, man. Let's talk about the hat. Tell me what's going on.
Well, you're a little bit in this technology sector from what I know. But I'm home and I'm in the studio. And I didn't have a studio in 2019, but obviously COVID created the need for a studio. And there's green screens and lights and all that stuff. And one of the things I started doing in early COVID was these 2-minute, I'll call them skits, with green screen and costumes and all of that. And they were fun. And they showed that I had a personality. We got the message across from leadership in a different way. And as I came into the studio today, I looked down and I saw this, probably bought for $2 at the Spirit Shop on November 1st. And it occurred to me that I haven't done one of those videos in probably a year and a half. And the point is that in the last 5 years, technology has changed dramatically. And what was cool in 2019 and 20 is obsolete in today. Whereas green screens were something that were just, hey, that's oh my God, that's amazing. Now there are apps that will put backgrounds in and you don't even need a green screen. So as we talk about welcome to 2026, and whether it's technology or culture, just because it worked for you a generation ago, let alone 5 years ago, may no longer be the case. So that was the hat.
Interesting. And I know, well, you and I have we talked a little bit about AI and technology, and I understand that you are a regular daily user of the AI tools. How did that kind of come about for you? How did you get there?
First of all, let's be clear, was it maybe 3 years ago when chat and some of the other platforms became a thing or was starting to become a thing? I was the guy who said, I'm never going to use that. I'm my own man. I can come up with my own ideas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And today I'm at a place where I don't want to say I use it every day, but I probably use it every day. And the point being, I didn't understand it. I hadn't used it. I hadn't tested it. I hadn't learned to work with it. So, for example, on a creative side right now, maybe a piece of research last night, I wanted to do a new exercise. I said, and I got into a conversation with the model. So it wasn't doing my thinking for me, or editing. I may write a LinkedIn post and say, hey, edit, proofread this for me. So I haven't outsourced my brain, but I have definitely outsourced some of the grunt work, what I would call number crunching in your world, and some idea iteration, not idea creation, but hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and it really has been transformational for my business.
What would you say has been like the I guess what motivated you to want to start, and then what maybe we'll start there.
I'm a capitalist. I love what I do, but I'd like to make money when I'm doing it. And like most everyone listening to this podcast, we're a for-profit enterprise. So how can I get a little bit more efficient? And maybe more importantly, how can I deliver a better product to my clients? So here's an example. We do personality profiles. We do some pretty high level ones, and I had, they're 50-page reports, and the client said, "Can you summarize this?" And traditionally, I would have summarized it by myself, and it was a very labor-intensive process. So I asked, in this case, Chat, "Are you familiar with this?" "Yes, I'm familiar with it." And then I tested Chat, and I said, "Tell me about it. What is this assessment designed to do?" Because some of these AI models will just make you feel good, and so I verified that the model knew what it was talking about, not just said it knew. And then I dumped a 50-page report in, and it gave me a 2-page summary. And I said, "Wow, that's pretty good." And then I edited it, and I did it again and again and again and again. And after 30 reports, now think about how much time I've just saved. It saved me about 30, 40 hours of time. But after 30 reports, it said, "Are you seeing the trend that I'm seeing?" Oh my God. What I didn't ask you for that, but what is it? And it said, "Well, here's what I'm seeing." And I was aware of that. I mean, I spend time in this industry. I only work in the construction industry, but it broke it out with some language and some differentiation and what I would call some granularity that traditionally I wouldn't have had. So it gave me a story to tell and an insight to deliver that I previously hadn't been able to do. So, AI and LLMs for the sake of LLMs, no, but for a more efficiency, for a better value to the client, that's why I'm using it.
Excellent. I appreciate that. And I love what you said about just kind of like getting in there and just doing it, because I feel like a lot of people are stuck on like where, or maybe like, oh, which one do I use, or which model, or what's the latest and greatest, or they have all of these questions, and then these are things that block them from just even getting started in the first place. And one other thing that a friend of mine, mentioned to me last week that I really appreciated was he was like, "You don't even you can ask the models to teach you, right? If
Yes.
they will teach
Yes.
you, if you have kind of that, beginner's mindset, if you."
Yeah, I want to create an app that does X. How do I do Y? All of that. And the other piece I heard was, if you take it down a path in ChatGPT, cut and paste that entire thing into Picket, Perplexity, Claude, whatever, and ask it to validate it. So you get another perspective at it, and usually it's about 90% right or agreed. It might change some language or whatever.
Well, on kind of a more personal note, I'm curious about like your trajectory and your journey. So you did Marines first, and then your MBA, and then you were with FMI, and now of course, Firestarter. Like, when did you realize that kind of leadership was like the product that you're selling, and what attracted you to construction?
Well, let me answer the second question first, because I think you and I had very similar summers. In that, my brother and dad were Teamsters in New York City. So every school break that I had, I was a helper on jobs at age, 13, 14, 15. I think you had a similar experience where the shovel was in your hand, and I want to say you learned to respect the trades. Um, so when I'm standing with people in the construction industry, particularly foreman, superintendent, it's like I'm with my brother. There's a fundamental respect there. They don't care that I have letters behind my name. I don't care that I have letters behind my name with, education, certifications, etc. It's just that these are two dudes trying to make life better. So that's, how did I get into the construction world? I've kind of always been in the construction world if you go back. Now, my experiences being an officer of Marines and being in armor, hey, tracked vehicles, and then being a pilot and then working for FMI. It's one of those things where when you're doing it, the career path looks like this, and when you look back on it, it looks like this. That everything, everywhere I was, I learned along the way. I was learning things along the way that now that as I stepped into this consulting world, I, it just it all came to a head. Clearly, my love of leadership was from being a Marine officer and having led people there. But then I come out into corporate America and I led people there. I recognize that people are the best profit strategy or best win strategy. And actually, I've said that for about a decade now, but in the last year, I've changed it. It's not people are the best profit strategy. It's well-led people are the best profit strategy. And that's it. Just kind of all came together.
It's excellent. It's funny how I first heard your name. Like, I had no idea who you are, but I was just sitting with a client, and they basically said, "This is a name that most people know," and they basically said, "We don't work with consultants, but we work with Wally." So uh, that's how I first heard about you. So it's pretty cool. Tell I want to learn more about the book and kind of your philosophy. So you wrote a book called No Yelling.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and in an industry that has historically run on yelling, like, what made you kind of stake your flag there?
Well, I want as a speaker and consultant and knowledge expert, the book becomes a big business card. You can get it on Amazon, no yelling. But what I didn't want it to be, and there's too many books out there of people with an opinion, and opinions are interesting, but I didn't think my opinion was that compelling. So I interviewed 100 Marines or former Marines, and I asked, "What's leadership?" Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the quotes from one of the interviews was, "It's not about yelling, it's about impact." And that whole phrase stuck with me. And if we take it a little bit further, I remember being on a TV interview as we were doing a promotion tour for the book. Well, we've all seen this. You get to the end of the interview, whether it's 5 minutes or 30 minutes, and the interviewer asks this question of, well, so how, he says, we've got 30 seconds remaining. In the history of leadership from Christ until modern times, with a particular emphasis in the Renaissance, they asked this incredibly long question. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, clock ticking, clock ticking, clock ticking. And then he says, how would you summarize this? And I'm like, trust and respect. It all comes down to trust and respect. So if we trust and respect our people, we have a chance that they'll trust and respect us. Now, yelling in and of itself is not disrespectful, but most yelling actually is disrespectful. I mean, you can raise your voice to me and get my attention, and you can be frustrated, and so it's conceptually trust and respect.
Yeah, I think yelling is like the first step towards, like, honestly, in my opinion, like, towards violence. And
Well, it is, yeah.
uh I as somebody who's actually been yelled at on a job site, like, I remember distinctly every single, just like I remember every single nice compliment that anybody ever gave me that was my boss. Very similarly, I remember every time, that I was yelled at, or self-admittedly, when I yelled at somebody else. Because I remember one time we had a bad subcontractor, and I went out on the job site, and, like, I yelled at him and I threw my hard hat, and I was like 26 years old, and I felt about this small after I did that. And I finally apologized to the guy, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, and then I did it, and I was just like, I just want to go take, like, a hot shower.
So it may not just be yelling, right? It could be the finger in your face where you're going, now look, it's quote violence. Look, ultimately we go to silence or violence. We withdraw and say nothing, or we overly engage. When really what we want to have is the adult to adult response of, hey, this isn't quite how we're supposed to do it. Let's talk about it, etc. Look, you're allowed to get frustrated. We get frustrated. That's fine. But getting off your game and losing your perspective, uh, you lose it at that point. So let's don't miss the learning point here. You said you remember the times you've been yelled at, and you remember those specific pieces of praise. To the folks listening to this, when's the last time you went out and caught somebody doing something right? And the answer is never. Nah, actually, 79% of frontline leaders would say they get praise and recognition monthly or never. Uh, and I don't mean nice job. I mean nice job getting the erosion control in place before this tropical storm. Specific, memorable pieces of feedback. Catch people doing something right. Oh, but Wally, that's lowering the standard. Everybody gets a trophy. No, it's not. It's just recognizing people for doing what they're doing. But we live in a punch list mentality. We fix things that are wrong. We don't reward things that are right.
Punchless mentality. That is well, let's dig in here a little bit because I think this is an important topic and something that I struggle with honestly, Wally, when I was running jobs was
Yeah.
it felt like every time that I was like, "Hey, I'm really proud of you guys for the great job that you did on this." Like the next day, it's like, now we got to go rip out that 120 feet of pipe because we laid it wrong and the
Oh,
slope's
yeah.
not right. And it was like I had a conversation with a really good general superintendent who like he was good. He was good at giving. He knew how to kind of balance it. But he and I had this conversation, and we're like, man, God, does it seem like every time that we give really positive feedback that we have to go back and like fix something? And it's almost like we're never out of the woods until the job is like done and sold. How do we give that, like, really constructive, positive feedback, along the way without telling everybody, or without giving our team the impression that, we're good and we can kinda lay back?
Well, yeah, the, there's um we can praise a task. Like I can be doing something right along the way, and yeah, hopefully, yeah, hey, we got 120 feet done. We were supposed to get 100 feet, and now we got to go rip it out. All right, clearly we missed something along the way. Um, but it's about making it more normal. So like I said, we have no problem with saying, quote, what we did wrong and criticizing somebody. Um, but we have a time hard. It's not in our DNA to say, quote, nice things. But if you catch people doing something right, you just work it in, not a big deal. It doesn't become the norm. It's okay, right? So yeah, just make it part of the normal thing. That way it won't be so unusual, but it will be memorable. Now, you know, in the moment we said, "Hey, nice job." Oh my God, there was a quality issue. Hey guys, I appreciate the effort yesterday. We got 120 feet done, and we didn't quite get it right. Let's go back and talk about what we did wrong. I mean, make it all a learning opportunity.
Um, yeah, I agree. It was something that I kind of struggle with, and one thing that helped me kind of, like, reframe it a little bit was kind of there's this like Nick Saban approach or mentality where he basically is like, it's not about like, don't look at the scoreboard, right?
Right,
Just
right.
focus on like, what are we supposed to do? And then praise people for like the effort that they made. That's another thing. Like, that's another like mindset thing. I feel like, I like, I've tried in the past is to praise people for effort as opposed to the results. And,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
sometimes that, has worked out. I mean, what do you see, like, if you're looking at, like, a frontline supervisor, like, and you're what do you see as, like, the really good characteristics and traits and habits and routines in construction?
Well, we talked about trust and respect a minute ago. I would add humility as one of the new words, but that's not quite the question you asked. When we look at good operations leaders all the way up the chain, two things. Yes, I'm going to say great leadership, great culture, great people, all that stuff, great systems, great processes. We can call this management and leadership, systems and culture, process and people. The only way you produce superior results is to be great in both of those things. So at the field level, this would be understanding production, understanding where I am on the job. Not, we were supposed to get 100, we got 105 yesterday, we're doing great. Or I know where I stand. Not that bravado, I know the job, but data that says, what from whatever software it's coming from that says, um, we're ahead by X, we're behind by Y. That data with which to manage the job.
So knowing where you're at every day and kind of understanding how that lines up with what's in the bid.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the questions I'll ask, particularly if I'm standing in front of frontline people, say, "What do you do for a living?" I'm a paving guy, I'm a pipe guy, I'm a construction guy. Wrong answer. You're a business person. You are running a small business out there. And it could be bigger than the majority of small businesses in America. I mean, these leaders out there are running scopes of work of millions and tens of millions of dollars. So they are business people. The only difference is it's a funded startup for them because somebody else is on the line from a profit perspective. At the end of the bottom line perspective, but they're business people. So to do that, you have to understand the business of the business. That rework has a outsized economic impact because the cost of ripping it out, the reputational piece, the cost of putting it back in, opportunity cost, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding the impacts of that from a business perspective, and understanding production from a business perspective is equally important as the leadership perspective. Let me say it differently. You can be God's gift to leadership. You can have read every book. You can be every word I say. But if you can't get materials to a job site and you can't get paid for putting them in place, everything I teach doesn't matter.
I like that. It's realistic. And not something I would say that you hear from like a quote unquote like leadership, person, but very like grounded in, reality. I mean, to your point, a lot of the, most all construction companies, to my knowledge, are, for profit enterprises, and not, pretending that that's not the case, doesn't is I would say, a disservice, if you will. So I appreciate that it's like that's very grounded, in reality. Um, what construction is facing like a massive labor shortage right now, Wally. We've got like 350,000, workers short. And I think there's, I've read some statistics that I think 40% of the workforce is going to be retiring, in the next 7 years. What what are your thoughts on that? And kind of what are you seeing in out in the field with the frontline leaders?
Well, first of all, you can't argue with the numbers and the demographics. That's a mathematical fact that we've just gone over a demographic cliff with the number of high school graduates. I mean, you're seeing colleges close now, um, because there's no one to go to school. Now, not the Ohio States and all of that stuff, but there are small colleges closing across the country because there's not enough kids to go to college. Um, well, if there's not enough kids to go to college, there's definitely not enough kids to get into the trades. There's not enough kids to get into everything. So this then becomes not the opportunity, but the mandate. So as we look at, this was said to me by the CEO of one of the biggest road builders in the world, and he said, I was talking to his young leaders conference, and he said, just tell them to be patient. All they have to do is show up for the next 10 years and they'll be a vice president. I mean, the numbers are stark. So what does it look like out on the job site? And you're seeing this big push right now in the social world, and online and all that stuff. Is we've been preaching bring back the trades for probably 10 years. And now it's, well, wait a second, we bring them in and then they don't stay because the culture sucks. So now they say there's not a labor crisis, there's a leadership crisis. Well, I've been saying that for 20 years. So it's like a bait and switch. You bring people in, you say, this is going to be a wonderful career for you. And then it's miserable. It's shut up and dig. And this is a generation that's been asked their opinion. Now, let's be clear about something here. I never said lower the standard, and I never said everybody gets a trophy. But the leadership methods that worked 50 years ago, 80, by the way, they worked. I mean, we won World War II, we won the Cold War, like good stuff. Um, just not as effective anymore. It's why I started with a Viking hat on my head because the technology and the means and methods and the leadership styles that we were doing, from a technology perspective 5 years ago, different. I mean, look at your product, how it's evolved in the last couple of years, and it's not just incremental. It's exponential change. So, same thing from a leadership perspective. That what used to work doesn't not work, but it's significantly less effective. So, if you want to have a great culture, you need three things on the job site. You need trust, pride, and camaraderie. Trust in my immediate supervisor. I think we used that word already. Pride in my organization. And let's face it, building roads, putting pipe infrastructure in place, man, that's good stuff. And maybe the company does, the hike for hope for suicide or whatever. And then camaraderie with whom I work. I like who I work with. Um, and that is what it takes. And oh, by the way, when you do all those things, retention goes up, safety goes up, productivity goes up, turnover goes down, dot, dot, dot. Two things happen. There's more smiley faces and more dollar signs. And that's what we're all about.
Yeah, I really like that. Um, like that mindset. When you talked a little bit about retention, like what do you consider? I mean, because you work with a lot of big contractors. What do you consider like what are some numbers you want to know when you're looking at retention, and what do you consider like best in class? How do you determine that?
Yeah. So we there are definitely two populations. The one is that inside 90 days or inside a year population, and then everybody else. Because with good cultures, we know if we can get them past, again, 90 days to a year, they're probably not going anywhere. But you see turnover rates, even in the best companies, at 50, 60% in that population. It's brutal. Because people are like, yeah, this isn't for me, even in the best places. But when we move into what I would call best in class organizations, you should be seeing turnover levels in the single digit, 5 to 15% range. That's what best in class looks like. It's almost like you got to push people out because people don't want to go. And sometimes you need to let people go.
That's really low. I mean, just, my family was in the construction business, and I'll just go ahead and lay this out there. I mean, we had at one point we had a turnover rate which was mostly driven by like the entry. It was a lot of it was the entry level type folks that would come in, and then, they would stay for, less than, 3, 4 months, and then they would leave. But regardless, our numbers were 25%. 25%. And we had one of our board members say, 25%, huh? You know what that means? That means every 4 years, you're turning over your entire company.
Yeah, but that's not true because you're turning over that first year person,
But but
right?
but
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 yes,
but
but
s but
yes,
statistically, right? Like,
yes.
it's like basically, theoretically, it's like a new company. Now, of course, we had people who worked there for
Yeah,
40.
40
We
years.
had a 40 plus year, multiple 40 plus year employees and folks that were super dedicated, and a great, like, core of people. But our retention numbers were way out of whack. And what's interesting is that, like, we weren't really measuring it, I don't think, the way that we, should have been. And the more that we dug into it, it was like we started to break it down by division, and we started to break it down by classification, like what type of employee, and then also
Yeah,
by
yeah.
supervisor, you know? So, and that's when we started saying, "Oh shit, like, okay, this person has like a 10% hit rate, and this person over here, I mean, you know, everybody's sticking around with them. What is that what is that telling us about the leaders of the crew?" And when people started to see their name next to it, that's when things started to, I think, start to move, in a more, positive direction with us. I'm curious, like, of the clients that you work with, like, how do they think about that number, and how do they work to, get that down?
Yeah. So there are different ways to calculate it, right? So that can get into a conversation as well. But one of obviously CW Matthews, we both know them well. They do their annual safety awards, and there's and safety incentives and bonuses and whatever, and there's a lot of permutations of that. But it's interesting that the crew leaders who have the best safety year after year after year after year also have no turnover. Um, and the guy who never gets on the stage has high turnover. Uh, what more data do you need? But what I think the best of class companies are doing, first of all, clearly articulated value statement, and it's not just I'm going to offend some people here. Safety, quality, integrity. That's looked good on a website 30 years ago because an MBA said you need it. But what I mean is, and embedded in this are safety, quality, integrity. But companies that add a little bit more granularity to it. Sargent does a great job. CW, Strack, Scotty's, Emery Sap have their 5 Ps. I mean, these are folks that everyone has heard about before, and there's a reason. So it starts with values, which are foundational and directional. In other words, we know who we are. And values only have value if you value them. Speaking of World of Concrete this year, and I asked the audience, how many of you have values? Most of the hands go up. How many of your people know the values? And the guy in the front row said, yes, we know it in the boardroom, but I don't know if the rest of the company knows it. All right, that's a foul. But then the next piece of it is, which means we're reinforcing them along the way. We're integrating them into huddle talks and all of that stuff. If your values have value, they will have value. If you don't value them, they don't have value. The next thing is frontline leadership training. We know that frontline leader, we've already talked about them a little bit. Great leadership, great people, great systems, great process, that these folks are being given the skills to supervise, not lead, not manage, but supervise uh, in a way they've never done before. Some of it is you got youngsters stepping up. Some of you got oldsters trying to need to learn the new way. And that is probably the next piece of it. And then I would add a robust succession planning process. In other words, we're intentionally looking at bench strength and having those conversations, not intuitively, not yet. Because here's the thing, Tristan, you're pretty good, and you're on the succession plan for 6 different people in the company. That doesn't work. So having an intentional conversation about succession planning. Now, as we think about the listeners on this call, some of them are $20 million company and some of them are $2 billion companies. So you got to right size all of this. But conceptually, it's all the same.
What would you say is the most common mistake that you see contractors make? Like, if you like, what's the most common pattern where you're like, oh man, I'm tired of seeing this.
Um, Rework and downtime. Which, by the way, are more management and systems things and construction process things than leadership things. Um, but we're leaving so much money on the bottom line, leaving so much money and not flowing it to the bottom line. So if I've got an engaged team who care, we go back to your example or our example of you got 120 feet, but it was wrong and we got to rip it out. Whereas if I have somebody who's engaged who at 10 feet says, hey, boss, I don't think we're getting that weld done correctly or whatever it is. Um, that could preclude that. But good is the enemy of great, and so many contractors they're making money, they're fine, but the difference between fine and superior is lost time, whether it's rework or downtime. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that most self-performing contractors make. They're doing fine, and fine is the enemy of fantastic.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is that there's there are a wave of I would say like contractors that were maybe started within the last, was started probably post 2008,
Mm, yeah.
and they may not have been through the hard times and seeing, what it's like to go through, a recession. And when it was, when it was hard, I'm sure you remember that, like basically like there was private work went from like, 100 to zero basically. And, people were, it was tough. And I think anybody who's ever been through one of those experiences knows how important it is to never like rest on your laurels as a contractor and to always be growing and always be learning. And that's also just the competitive nature of construction too, right? Because if you're not, then somebody else is going to be stepping in.
So this gets into another mistake I think people are making these days. And if you were around in '08, you downsized. You had to fire people. And most humans I know, that's a really painful experience. So the reaction to that, the overreaction to that is don't overstaff. Okay, but that doesn't mean understaff. And when you look at operations leaders, whether it's field or office these days, they are working a lot of hours, 55, 65, 75 hours just to get it done. And yeah, they may be compensated for that. They may be rewarded for that. But we also do have one of the highest suicide rates in the entire nation in this thing called construction. So, what are we doing from a wellness, quality of life perspective? And yeah, people are making money. And you'll hear Aaron Witt say it. Yeah, you can be a tradesman making $120,000 a year, but you're working two jobs because you're working 80 hours a week. So understanding that dimension of it, that maybe that requires an extra body or two, or maybe that requires a different way of going at it. You know, dare I say flex time? Oh my God, no. There's what maybe you got an early start crew and a late start crew. Or maybe you're working 4 12s instead of 5 12s, or what. These solutions are out there right now. People are figuring this out. And the net of that is people look around and go, you know something? I'm going to stay with your company because I'm not going to go to that company, or I'm going to come to your company because they're working me like a dog at this company. So there's more to it than money. And people think money's a motivator. For some people, it is. For some people, it's not.
Yeah, I think people generally in construction probably over-index on the dollar when it's usually about like feeling valued and feeling appreciated. And also feeling like I'm a part of something that's like really cool and really like
Yeah.
something that's, bigger bigger than me. I like to tie this back to kind of like Chick-fil-A, right? I go to Chick-fil-A. I walk in there, I get greeted, and they have like the orders ready. And if it's not ready, they're like, "Hey, we're working on it. Is there something I can get you, while you wait?" There's like the tables are cleaned, like they don't the stuff doesn't sit there for more than like a minute. Somebody's coming by. They're adequately staffed. The bathrooms are it's like Bucky's, right? You go to the Bucky's bathrooms, are incredibly clean, and it's because they have people that are assigned to go make sure that it is that way consistently across the entire country. So, like, they're adequately staffed, and they also compensate, their people well. And it's a place where you can make a really good living, and construction, I think, is that. But there's we still had a lot of work to do to fill the gap. To your point that you said earlier, I think this is really smart. It's like it just feels like it's less about like can we get people? I think we can. It's can we keep people, right?
Yeah, I mean, people are hiring every single day, which would suggest there's bodies out there. Or is it that same guy working between 5 companies over 5 years? But there's people hiring, there's people coming in. But we go back to that turnover number. Let's start tracking that and aggressively lowering it. No, by the way, even the companies that do all of this stuff, the demographics are against you. So you're going to get people that visit and go, yeah, this isn't for me. There is going to be higher turnover in year one. That's just it. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be investing in culture. I've never seen a company, let's look at Chick-fil-A. I've never seen a company that cut its way to success. You invest your way to success.
I would agree. There's so many other examples. Costco's another one. They pay their people, they generally have a few less, but they pay their people way, way, way more, than other folks in the industry.
Yeah, so let's talk about Chick-fil-A. So we visited them a last year.
Tell me.
Part of our advanced leadership program. We went to headquarters. We had very high level access, and here's an example. So first of all, owner operators at the local level, not franchisees. So you have that owner in the store. That's a big difference for sure. But let's go to corporate where they have thousands of people, and they recognize that during COVID they had hired a lot of people and many of them had never been to a restaurant because it wasn't legal to go to restaurants. Whereas traditionally there was this initiation orientation where even, your accounting person would go to a restaurant for a while. That had gone away for obvious reasons. And they recognized they needed, I'll call it a back to basics approach. And they created a program to reinstill the values, reinstill the connection with operations, the field. Oh my, don't we have a field office chasm in construction? That so they said, hey, you know something, we gotten away from who we are. We need to do something to get to who we are. They spent a boatload of money on it, but now they got that alignment again. And when you look at leadership in its direction, alignment, and commitment, alignment is always the lowest number. So this whole culture thing that doesn't happen by accident. When you look at your equipment fleet, you maintain the heck out of it. There's policies, procedures, and timelines, and we're going to pull oil at 250 hours, whatever it is. We do none of that with our people.
Yeah. I Chick-fil-A. We could have a whole episode about Chick-fil-A. I'm so fascinated with the way that they operate and consistency. So it's a cool
Take
organization.
take a look at a book called The Founder's
The
Mentality.
founder's mentality. All right. I
Yep.
will
They cite it. It's about how do you grow, how do you become complex, and how do you retain the you know the secret sauce, so to speak. They referred to it.
well, that actually leads me to the question that I like to ask every guest. So, aside from the founder's mentality, what are you reading or what have you read, recently that you really liked?
When are we going to get to the part about you and I disagree on things?
That's a good question. We can do that. I think one thing that I had asked you is, or that I had said that I think it's important for somebody who estimates and somebody who is responsible for project managers to estimate a job every once in a while and to build a job every once in a while. Um,
Yet.
because I think it keeps you sharp, and I think if you know how to use the tools, like the right questions to ask, and the further away you get from that, I think the more disconnected you can get. So I'm not saying you bid every single job, but I am saying like you should stay sharp. And I know people who continue to do this every year and who I believe are like operating at the top of their game. And you kind of push back on that and you were like, well, like what about giving the next gen, opportunities? So that's
Yeah.
something we kind of just
This is great. I love this.
look.
So, broader context for everybody, this was a LinkedIn exchange where we get 1,100 characters to debate the world. And specifically, you were talking about a chief estimator doing takeoff and estimating and that kind of thing. And I pushed back and said, do your own job first. That's not what he's getting paid to do. I think we're more in alignment than we might think. But let me take it to the field. When there's a superintendent or a foreman on a machine, he's the highest paid operator we have. He's not getting paid to run the machine. So when I hear chief estimator doing takeoff, I hear the same thing. Um, Now,
Interesting.
here's the pushback we're going to get. Wally, I wouldn't do anything I wouldn't ask my people to do. I'm showing respect. I'm being a role model by hopping on that machine or doing a takeoff. Yes, you absolutely are. How often? So if you say to me, in your case, as an estimator, I want to get in and do nuts and bolts just to make sure I'm fresh and I haven't lost my edge. That's great. But if you're doing it on a regular basis, you're not, quote, doing your own job first. Let's take it down to the field. If you're an operator, a superintendent foreman, and you hop on a machine because there's nobody else to run that machine, or it's in a confined space, a urban area, and you're like, hey, this is really risky. I have no problem with that. Or maybe there's new machine controls and you want to learn how to use that machine. I have no problem with that. Well, when you are regularly hopping on the machine, quote, whatever that looks like, you're the highest paid operator we have. And what happens is the entire organization sags. So I have a foreman doing operator work. Who's ordering materials for tomorrow? I have a superintendent doing foreman work. Who's looking at cost? I have an assistant project, and the entire organization sags. So chief estimator, yes, not a problem. Get in and do a takeoff. But if you're regularly doing that, who's doing the real reviews? Looking at the market, not just cost, because that's what junior estimators do, but who's looking at what the competitor did, what the trend is, who's looking at your platform to say this actually may be a good thing. Where is the strategic nature of it? It's the exact same thing in finance. We have too many controllers, not enough CFOs. It's the same thing in the shop. We have too many shop managers as opposed to equipment leaders. We see it. The entire organization sags, and that's not good.
Yeah, so I've seen this on crews. The second if I ever rolled up on a crew and a foreman was running like a spinal pipe crew and the foreman was running the hoe, like something's wrong in my opinion. Like
Right.
unless like the guy's out, which if he's out,
Yes.
maybe it makes sense, but honestly there should
Totally.
be a backup person and I think you've got to build people. You got to cross train people. It's a very 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 important thing especially on I mean, on a paving crew, if you have somebody who can run the screed and run the rollers and run the bobcat, like that's incredibly important and for you to be like flexible and be able to move people in and out. So I totally agree on that point. And I don't think that taking the perspective of like I'm the only one who can do this is empowering either for the crew members because they're like, well, what do you mean? Like you don't trust us? Like how the heck are we gonna learn? If you don't let us do it. Um what I'm referring to is somebody who's been so far disconnected from it that you almost you almost don't really go to them with the hard questions because you're kind of like, no, they're too big time for that now, you know?
Well, and here you see it too in the let's use it in financial modeling for overhead. We used project managers or estimators, used to bid 5 jobs or manage 5 jobs. They could do a $50 million worth of work. I'm making up a number,
Yeah.
right? And now they can only run $30 million worth of work. They're soft. They're not as good. Back in my day, we ran 50 million. Yeah, you didn't have all the requirements that you had. You didn't have all the paperwork, all that. In other words, the nature of the work has changed. And these folks that are out of touch are out of touch. So I think that's an important add to this conversation.
Yeah, and another part of like where this part of where this post came from was I'm reading a book called The Book of Elon, which is basically, Elon Musk's mostly like interviews and things that he said or written and part of like how Tesla structures their teams, which is that, the people who are the engineering managers also spend time writing code and stay involved. Now, maybe it's closer to like 80% managing and 20% like doing some of the IC work. But I think it's one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got in construction was like I wanted to be promoted really badly to project manager when I was a field engineer, and the guy that I worked for was like, pretty much with all due, pretty much with all due respect, he was like, "You're not ready." And he's like, "You really need to understand everything about the work and what you're gonna be managing so that you know the right questions to ask the new person, that's coming up." And, and in time, I was patient, and stuck with it, and he was a great, mentor to me. I was able to get there, but I think it is important to, like, earn that, as you're stepping up in the org, and then also to keep your, stay sharp. Stay sharp.
So, with all due respect, you are never going to know it all. You were never going to, because you were going to go through it in 4 or 5 years and move out. He'd been there for 40 years and going to stay.
Yeah.
That next foreman was going to stay. So, oh man, this gets me going. How long does it take to become competent or proficient as opposed to expert? Look, we need experts, but experts need not be supervisors. Supervisors can be competent in the task. They know what questions to ask, or they know who to ask. But look,
Yeah.
I know Bubba down the road has seen this before. My favorite on this is military guys coming out of combat engineers in the military. He's a sergeant. He's led people. How long before he can run a pipe crew? I think 2 years. Oh no, it's got to be 5. No way. Really? He's been doing it already. He's been doing it while he's getting shot at. He doesn't have all the answers, but he has most of the answers.
Yeah. We
Or she, by the way,
Or
or
she.
she.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually seen this with field managers, aka, most people refer to this as a foreman. I don't know. I don't know what your stance on that is, but, uh, it's when somebody like, we assumed that the person who ran the crew was basically the only one who could because they had been doing it for that long, and then all of a sudden something happens, they mouth off to the wrong person or they step in it and they're gone. And I was always it amazed me at how somebody who hadn't actually been there for that long could actually step in and run the crew and do a better job. And it was not because of technical ability. Like, technical ability was freaking irrelevant. It was about their ability to lead people. And
Well led people are the best profit strategy.
yeah, and did he have all of this technical, stuff and been around the dirt moving the way that this guy had, and been in the traco for 20 years? No. But he was pretty good at getting the crew lined out, and they were and that was a very happy, safe, high quality, productive crew that could move the hell out of some dirt. After the original leader had left.
Right.
So this is
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, well, good. Well, that's probably. I think that might be a good stopping point for us. I'm glad that we got to respectfully disagree on some things. So I really appreciate.
Well, let me answer your question about what am I reading, I
Yeah.
think was the question.
Oh,
I'm kind of nerding out on Normandy again. We take an advanced leadership program. We graduate there on a regular basis. I've been there 15 times. So I'm kind of nerding out on that again. But let's change the question. And first of all, you got people listening to this podcast. Good on you. Um, I don't care what you're reading or consuming, because let's just think.
yeah.
But if you're stagnant, I'm talking about the people listening. If you're stagnant, you're not growing. And if you're growing, you're losing ground. So what are you learning? And oh, by the way, it could be golf or pickleball. What are you doing to make yourself not one dimensional? And why does this matter? Because it stimulates brain growth. And that keeps us sharp. And then the other thing I would add is, when are you not reading? And I'm going to tell you, this fills every moment. Boredom is key to creativity and innovation. But it's when we're sitting around and the brain just starts working that we come up with ideas. And we have filled our downtime with this, and we are stifling creativity and innovation with it. So the question here is not what am I reading? It's what am I learning? What am I nerding out on? How am I expanding my brain? How am I creating more connections, neurons, etc., so that I continue to be competitive and then profitable, or at least happy as we go forward?
Yeah. Growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. Totally.
Pretty much.
So, well, great. Well, Wally, this was really fun. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for sharing your message. I think it'll be very impactful for our listeners. If where should people find you?
Yeah, I mean, the website is nice, wallyadamchik.com. If people want to take a leadership capacity assessment of their company, they can go to constructionleadership.com. But as you know, I live on LinkedIn and post there regularly. So I'd invite people to follow me on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks again and really appreciate it. So